Alright, so let's split this huge method that we have, the show restaurants method, into smaller methods so we can see individual actions that are done within this method. The first thing that we want to do to make the code more readable is by splitting these methods, and the first method that we want to extract is this portion of code, this logic of getting the restaurants from the server. The second one is this one, where the actual parsing of the response from the server happens, and we're going to have to extract this as well. And the third one is actually the filtering and the sorting of the restaurants. Finally, we have to extract in a separate method the logic for presentation. And right now, let's start with the first one, the one that gets the restaurants from the server. The cool thing that we can do here is actually take this code here and copy, and then let's paste it somewhere above in a separate method. So what we can do is just copy this, and let's create a method of our own, and let's call this get restaurants. I get that this should be pretty intuitive. All right, and let's paste the code. We have some corrections here to do. So first, let's add this brackets and the parentheses and so on. Right now it should be fine. So what we have to do right now is we have to get the restaurants within this method, but unfortunately this cannot really happen because this is an RxJava block, and it's going to be a bit difficult to get for this method to actually return the results. So the response comes here in the subscribe block later as an async operation. So this is not going to work as expected. We can't really chain the methods one after another. What we can do here is basically pass a lambda parameter, a lambda function as a parameter to this get restaurants method, and basically just call that function inside the subscribe block where we get the result. And this way we can basically have a completion handler, so that when this request is done and the result comes from the server, that completion handler can be triggered, and basically the code inside the body of the method that we just pass as a lambda parameter will be executed when we will invoke this method. So we have this kind of cool syntax, and this is possible in Kotlin, where we pass this lambda here, and we tell that this lambda is going to be called completion handler, has no parameters for now, and it returns unit. That's some kind of void for Kotlin, so it just returns nothing. Just miss here the two dots and the semicolon, and right now this is the method. So what happens here, we pass a method, a completion handler, and this completion handler, let's call invoke on it, so that when the actual restaurants come from the server in the subscribe block, which is going to be async, we don't know when, the actual code inside this completion handler method is going to be executed. So the whole body of this completion handler is going to be executed when the response comes. Let's also add this response parameter here because we want to do something about the response. And right now it's complaining that, hey, I don't know what's this. So we have to pass this parameter here, and let's just call this restaurant list response. And right now our completion handler takes a parameter, the actual response from the server. So when the method get restaurants is called and this code is executed, this completion handler takes the response, which is a restaurants list response, and basically invokes and kind of enables all the code that is inside it to be executed. But right now we don't know what's the code, right? So let's work on this. In our show restaurants method, let's add the first step in our chain of methods called get restaurants. And as you can see, the IDE already completed this for me. As you can see, we have this get restaurants method, and inside this is the actual block of code represented by the completion handler. So this is basically in these two square brackets, we actually do this kind of parsing. Right now we want to parse, filter, and display the code here. So what happens, as I said, in the subscribe block, this completion handler is invoked, and basically when the response comes, we do the parsing, filtering, and displaying. We don't have these methods yet, but we will soon. And this is a very clean syntax that you can use in Kotlin for callbacks, for all kind of interesting completion handlers that you need. You basically kind of separate the logic inside the get restaurants, the actual network request, on the actual completion logic. So these two are kind of separated right now. All right, perfect. Let's get on to it. And let's focus on the first, actually the second method that we want to extract. And this one is the one that parses the restaurant. So we can select the code like this with our cursor. And we have a very cool thing here that I'd like to teach you. You can actually extract this by pressing Ctrl-Alt-M on Windows or Command-Option-M on Mac, and you get to this cool feature, cool window where you kind of customize the extraction of your function. As you can see, you have a visibility modifier there, the name that we are going to change in a bit, the parameters that it understands that it needs. So in our case, we need the response from the server that we are going to be parsing. And it also provides a very cool signature preview in which you can see how your extracted method is going to look like. So now let's rename. Let's call this method parse restaurant so we can tell them the name of the method. And you can see that it takes a parameter, which is the restaurant list response, and actually returns this list of restaurants. These restaurants are again the domain objects. Let's go. And right now, as you can see, it has extracted, the ID has extracted the method for me. And we have the method here in the old code. Let's disregard this. Let's copy paste this because in the end we'll delete all of this code. So let's take this new method here and place it in our get restaurants completion handler. So here we paste it and we have the parse restaurants as the first step. So this code is all, we don't really care about it. Let's move on right now to the second one. So we have the parse restaurants as a completion handler. We parse the restaurants with our parse restaurant method that we just extracted, and we can press Ctrl B on Windows or Command B on Mac to get directly to this method that we just extracted. And basically in this method is all the code that we have for the parsing. We didn't have to do this manually. The whole IDE did this extraction for us. All right, so let's move on right now to the second one. So we don't really care about this code. This is old. But this one here that I'm just selecting right now is the code for filtering. All right, so we want to extract this. Let's do the same thing. And right now, let's call this filter restaurant. So don't forget, I called this Command Option M or Control Alt M. All right, so let's see. This one also returns a list of restaurants, which is cool, and takes a list of restaurants because it has to filter them. And look how nice it has extracted the method. The IDE extracted this method for us. Let's ignore this and let's copy paste that filtering method. And here we just pasted it. And right now we can see that we have this kind of chain reaction. So on the response, on the completion of get restaurants, we parse the restaurants right now and we get the parsed result. And that parsed result, we pass it to the filter restaurant method. And we have this kind of chain reaction. It's very easy to read and understand what are the actions within the big method. Let's move on to the second one, which is this one that I'm selecting. And actually, let's select not this code. Let's select the code that is responsible for displaying the restaurants. I got a bit dizzy here. So this is the code that actually prepares the restaurants for display. It kind of sets these appropriate fields and then sets the restaurants to the adapter and the click listener. So let's do the same thing. Control or Command Option M. And right now let's call this prepare restaurants. All right. And again, this method, as you can see, takes a list of restaurants, but doesn't return anything. So this is fine because this method is going to only display the restaurants. All right, so this is the last step. And you can see that the IDE has already extracted the method for us really nicely. We don't have to do anything. Let's copy paste this here in the show restaurants like this. And right now we have the chain of reaction, as I can call it, complete. We do the parsing, the filtering, and then the result from the filtering is passed here in the prepare restaurants. Right now, this code we don't really need anymore. Let's delete this. We should have deleted it from the beginning. And right now, let's have a look at how clean our show restaurants is. And it's so easy to right now to identify bugs in any of these methods. If the QA comes and tells you, hey, there's an issue on the parsing, on the filtering, we know in which method we have to look into. And right now, as you can see, everything is very in steps and very clear and easy to read and understand. So this is a great improvement from our initial huge method. We have all of the methods extracted here. As you can see, they are smaller, but I mean, they're still big, some of them. So we are going to keep on refactoring them until we kind of reduce their size. So I guess that right now, as you can see, even this parse restaurants method here is pretty huge. Let's minimize this, and it has from 126 to 154 lines. It's kind of big. So maybe we are going to work on that later. Again, the filtering is pretty small. I mean, it's kind of have like 36 lines. It's fine, I guess, for a method that does something. We are still going to refactor that at some point. And the prepare restaurants is pretty decent as well. So right now we have these methods here that do something specific. As you can see, We get the parsing, the filtering, and the preparing, the filtering and the parsing. The order is not really intuitive, but we can reorder and that's not an issue. But right now, look how clean our show restaurants method is. It's so small and it's really clean. Let's cut this and place it a bit higher here so it's more intuitive on what is called when. So right now, this is the end result. This is how our show restaurants works. And look how nice and simple the logic is right now here displayed. It's very easy to track and understand what's happening in our show restaurants method. You don't have to read a ton of lines. All right. One more thing before we move on to the next lecture. In case you kind of lost track at some point, or you just have some errors, or you just want to compare your code with what we have done so far, you can just simply go to the resources for this class and search for the download link for this particular class, or you can get a link there to the repository. So if we get here to GitHub, where we have the repository, you can see that we have all the branches here. You'll see more branches as I progress. And now if you want the code for this solution, for this lecture solution, you can just make sure to select here the branch shorten and split method solution, which is exactly what we just did. And once you have this selected here, you go to code, download it as a zip, and then import it in Android Studio, or just import it via the HTTPS link as we did in the start of this class. So if you want to have a fresh starting point for the upcoming lecture, or if you want just to verify that your code is exactly as mine is, if you have some errors, you can do this so you can stay up to date with the code. Also remember that if you haven't followed so far, you will need this code so you can progress and follow in the upcoming class, upcoming lectures. So if you haven't done this, download it now so you can have the up-to-date code.